At least the news that won't give you the blues. We like to say that sometimes so that, well, to give some sort of warning, because for those who wouldn't care for that, that is, people who don't hear the news that is not blues-inducing, they can, I guess, turn on that nude senatorial wrestling on C-SPAN, on C-SPAN 2 or whatever. But it's actually the news analysis now. The ones they ask to be analyzed. Individually, the purpose of life is to live. Collectively, it is to appear as pursuing larger goals. Curious that this item should show up. I say curious. There was a recent news item on that, how they call that other kind of news thing out there in the regular world. Of course, there's one every day, but here's one. I'll pull this one out. A veteran border guard slain. And they interview his wife. And she says, after all the years of faithful service to the government, he was within 5 years of retirement. He was already buying a trailer home and all the kind of stuff that normally give you the blues. And the man slain in the line of duty, but she points out that what is really heartbreaking, besides losing her husband, is that he apparently lived his life, and not only died, but lived his life in vain because of the fact there has been not the least slowdown in the degree of illegal aliens entering our country. And think about it. Now, it's just one example. You people know, well, I'm sure I don't have to warn you not to get hung on that. I could bring up just almost anything you could think of going on constantly. But think about that. And she looks right in the camera, and she's serious, and of course, quite hurt, but that he just lived his whole life in vain. You know, whatever it was, 32 years of faithful service, killed. And of course, the insinuation, if she didn't say it outright, was it would be one thing if he died and I could see that he had some degree of success. But whoever that is, the Department of Interior or whoever it is, the figures show that it's increased. The illegal entry into the country, the numbers go up every year. And so he's dead and his whole life was in vain. All right. Except for this. The job he did kept he and his family alive and fed for what it was, 32 years. And as you know, but I'll say it for any strangers or civilians, this has nothing to do with illegal aliens, has nothing to do with a man's job, has nothing to do with death. And of course, if you're ordinary, by now you can say to yourself, well, what in the hell does it have to do with? Aha! I didn't tell you to turn this on. It just shows that you shouldn't be listening to this. You want the blues. But back to why we cover items like this is so that you've got to see how life works to ever do whatever it is you're trying to do. The woman's comment is absolutely bulletproof. That my husband not only is dead, I'm heartbroken, but he individually, faithful man, and she's surrounded, you know, the whole pictures of him in uniform and citations that he got. And she maybe even, so give her enough time, tell stories about some of the aliens that he captured trying to slip over, that he actually befriended, that he gave them money when he had to turn them back. Just a hell of a guy. And died. I mean, that's bad enough, but his life was in vain. Because the job he did, the figures show, there's no doubt, the job he was attempting to do, that is, to protect our borders, he lived and did his job in vain because the numbers are up and been up every year for all the 32 years that he faithfully served. So it's obvious His life was a waste. He was a failure in that sense, right? And there's no other thing you can say about it. Back to the news item itself. Individually, the purpose of life is to live. Collectively, it is to appear as pursuing larger goals. Just wanted to remind you. If the goal was to stop illegal aliens, then his life was in vain. She was correct. What department is that? Is that the Interior? Whoever it is. Our government, that whole department. However many people they got, X number of tens of thousands, is in vain. Of course, if you really want the blues, then you start thinking that you paid taxes and paid their salary. And it's done nothing. Every year it goes up. They hire more people, they raise your taxes, and they still come in. And if it wasn't this, we could pick out armed robberies, we could pick out bankruptcies, we could pick just everywhere you look once you begin to see it, based on this news item now. But now notice, at first glance, when I say this, absolutely, her statement is impeccable in its validity. That if his job was to protect our borders from the entry of illegal aliens, then the figures themselves by his own department that they go up every year, he did do his job in vain. And that's normally where they'll cut out, maybe the woman wipe a tear, and they go into the next news item. Except for this. Now, if we just left it there, it is. The man, he's in vain, but we could pick out every other field. Education, religion, politics. Except for this. The very job, the thing he did that was indisputably in vain, they're interviewing here at the house. Real nice house, better than we live in, possibly. Already out there is the $120,000 motor home that they're already buying, since he's going to retire in 3 years. Except for this fact that his job was in vain, he lived his life in vain, except for the fact that he has his home, it's paid for, they'd already paid a good part on a $120,000 motor home, the kids are in college. He did all this through 33 years of them being married, paying all the bills, getting raises all the time, and of course that none of this computes. So how can you say his life was in vain? Except, back to taking the original, her original view, that it undoubtedly was in vain, because what he was attempting to do failed. Failed. But how can you have success amidst failure, or those of you of a bluer kind of hue, how can you have failure or success amongst failure? Somebody get that success out of here. It's hard to have the blues and somebody come around and say, you've lost weight. And you're trying to sing us. Get those people out of here. Individually, the purpose of life is to live. There is no market for that comment. There's nowhere to peddle that. You can't get anybody to pay you for it. Even if you get people to agree to it, passionately, it will be the fringes and the dredges of society, because you're not supposed to agree to it. The purpose of life is not to live. Anybody can tell you that. Any civilized person, they could take one of several views. They could take a religious view, they could take a political view, they could take a humanitarian view. Their purpose of life is not to live. And they're correct at the civilized view, because if it was still there, we would still be jungle animals. We would still be no more than very ferocious, well, I started to say very ferocious cows and sheep. real devious cows and sheep with an opposable thumb is always the kicker, because we can always pick up things and beat the crap out of other cows with rocks and sticks, and they don't know. They look down at a stick to fight back, and they look at the hoof. They go, how does he do that? So, if we were back playing the news item of things being different in a way that I can describe, and it's easy to describe, and simultaneously things being still as they are, being able to picture them both together, then you cannot say the purpose of life is to live. That is far too, take any description you want, as I said. You could take religious views, you could take an approach from a political, economic angle. That just the immediate response from ordinary civilized minds would be, that is so selfish, that is so crude, that is not Of course, as parochial as most people are, if we take our part of the planet, somebody'd say, that's simply not American. Nationalism, any comment there on, have you ever noticed, very seldom gets much of a response. You can get people to laugh sort of about religion, kind of that nervous laughter, just ordinary people. Sometimes you can do it about sex, about their particular, whether you're male or female or something else. You can even do it, I guess, about race. But you get into nationality, think about how touchy people get. I mean, if you hadn't been attacked, they're just prepared to be touchy. Like, well, I don't think I'll laugh at that. Well, it's not the American way just to be selfish and live for yourself. As though they're Americans. If you don't like that, how about, let's pretend we're doing this in Milan. Well, that's just, to try and just live your life for yourself is not the Italian way. As though there's the Italian way, which obviously is correct by that kind of comment, and then there's everybody else who just Philistines at the gate. There might be a few decent Greeks or maybe an Albanian here and there, but by and large, it's us blanks who've got to hold up the banner for decency and living not just for yourself. The purpose individually is to live. If you want to look at individual as being synonymous in the sense we've been using with hormones as opposed to neurons, you've got to see that's true. There would be no collective. If every cow, if it wasn't basically at a hormonal level, if it wasn't every cow for themselves, there'd be no herd to become civilized. So at that level, at the hormonal level, everybody is living for yourself. You go home tonight and eat. If you're hungry, you eat to stay alive. You might look down at the paper or turn on the TV while you're eating and it shows starving children somewhere, and you may go, my God, I'm going to check my checkbook, my balance as soon as I get from here, and I'm going to send them a check. But you do not stop eating. You do not say, well, I won't eat until everybody in the world's fed. You've got to stay alive to even attempt to do anything, to believe that you might have any effect. At the hormonal level, at the uncivilized level, if you'll follow that, the purpose of life is to live. That's it. Now that is far, far removed from an ordinary, civilized, intelligent person now, just at the ordinary level. That is no longer valid, and me trying to take an ordinary person's response, they would be correct if they said, you can't live like that. And they're right. Not just theoretically, you cannot live like that. People attempting to live like that are put away, shot, run out of town. They are not the mainstream of life. So that day is far gone, but it still remains. Because to take another picturization, as you know, even if you live in Manhattan, you still have Pacific Standard Time in you. Or at least any of you take offense if we get beyond the nationalistic level to the statehood level. Those of you who live in Los Angeles know that somewhere down your nervous system you still have Bayonne in you. So take either position you want. The past is still among us, just like a fungus. So individually, without talking about it, which you wouldn't talk about because you would be attacked if you did talk about it, and you'd be dominant, etc. But individually, you must live. The purpose of your life must be to stay alive, or else you can't do anything. That's it. That would be the hormonal level. At the neural level, the collective level, the civilized level, it must appear that you're pursuing larger goals. Now, this gets into many of the comments and news articles that we bring about being serious and that life is not serious, or it sounds like that sometimes people in the news that we present are inferring it's not. It is serious. That is, you've got to do it if you're ordinary. But if you are trying to slip out of an ordinary straitjacket, then you have to see what being serious is actually about. Individually, I'll read it again, the purpose of life is to live, while collectively it is to appear to be pursuing larger goals. The woman, speaking for her dead husband, correctly, he was pursuing a larger goal, to stop illegal aliens from entering this country. Nobody believes that's possible to do it. I don't mean just this country, anywhere. Go anywhere on this planet. If people right now in Armenia are trying to get into, God knows why, Azerbaijan, maybe to go there and figure out how to pronounce it, they're not going to stop them. If people in Turkestan are trying to get into Afghanistan, what are you going to do? You can't stop them. The whole idea of stopping people from crossing borders illegally is simply not possible. And that's just one thing, again, among many. Stopping crime is not possible. Stopping holdups at 7-Eleven stores are not possible. Well, what if we change the hours? I don't know. Check them out. As I think we have well established, anything in ordinary life, that has legs, institutional life, religion, all of the many constant, the continuing aspects of civilization, are doomed, in one sense, to failure, because if they succeed, if the purpose of life was to become a Christian, or anything, but let's say a Christian, and the church succeeded, it's suicidal. If the purpose of peniology, and don't look at your lap, it's not that, it's to stop crime, and they did it, then everybody who now works in the field of criminology, large part of our judicial system itself, all these people are out on the street and our taxes are up and we're up to our necks in ex-prison guards, which I don't know about you, but I don't want a bunch of ex-prison guards that still probably got arms and they're out of work now and nowhere to go. The purpose of prisons, the purpose of peniology is not to stop crime. I know they say it is, and religions say our purpose is to make everybody a real Jew, Christian, Muslim. But it's not. I know they say it is. They have to, because they have to appear to be pursuing larger goals. So the woman, back to the news item, the example I brought out from the regular news, the civilian news, the woman was quite valid. She was speaking for humanity. That her husband's life, as fine a fellow as he was, blah, 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 is his life, his job. He spent as much time at that job as he did at home. We didn't take offense because we knew that he considered it important. It was an important goal. And it's bad enough he's dead, but my God, it's like he lived it those 32 years, devoting half of his life every day, every week, year in, year out, to that job, and it was in vain. The flow of illegal aliens in this country, and they could be anywhere, has not gone down. It had gone up every year. But all that was important was to seem to be pursuing a larger goal. You've got to, if you're ordinary. But you can't succeed. But notice the human mind will not even go back to where I first pointed out, the obvious part, which you're not obviously supposed to mention or take note of, that, well, perhaps the influx of illegal aliens has increased. And so from what you're saying, madam, your husband and the whole immigration department did not succeed. But how can you say he lived in vain? You got 2 grown children that got through college. Yes, he paid their way. Yeah, no scholarship. This house paid for. Nice acreage here in Arizona. Yes, yes. And that motor home. Yes, yes, yes. And you've not dressed too shabby. Well, all right. But how does that compare with, of course, what brings it up is the passion, the hormonal passion of her mate being shot. But then to point out is like the final icing on his coffin, just to show you how people enjoy suffering. The whipped cream on his grave was not only is he dead, that's bad enough, but he lived his life in vain. Other than the fact of this hellacious, funeral, that casket, the home, the acreage. See, individual, the point was, if you stayed alive, he was within 2 years, whatever it was I made up, 2 or 3 years of retirement. So the guy lived to be, what are we going to assume, 62 years old. We're still not taking up for murder, of course. But understand, it's just the kind of thing that normally goes by and that people do not, if I may say so, have any occasion to analyze. None. Not because they're stupid, it is not part of the process of ordinary life. That you point out the man died in vain, or he lived his life in vain, because the very job that he devoted himself to passionately, that is, of stopping the influx of illegal aliens in this country, we have not succeeded. It's increased every year that he was on that job. But the man was 62 years old. Now individually, forget the job knowledge. 62 years old, and forget the job. What if he was, a bricklayer? The man lived 62 years, probably more, just looking at you, I don't want to frighten you, but probably longer than some of you. But anyway, he lived 62 years, bought this house, a little plastic surgery on his wife. She got nice clothes. He left a motor home, the house paid for, sent the kids through college. Now, I'm sorry he's dead. Let's all go, yeah, we're sorry he's dead. All right. But the point is, he lived his life in vain. That is, the larger goal was a failure. All larger goals are failures. Oh. Yeah, but you're not supposed to think that. Because if an ordinary person thought that to begin with, life would look me up and just slap the piss out of me. And of course, they're not going to hear it. And if they did hear it, it's not correct then once they hear it. Wait a minute, you mean all larger goals are in vain? They're all going to fail? Did I hear you correctly? And if an ordinary person asked me that, and I was the one they got it from, I'd have to go, oh no, I'm sorry, that's not what I said. Sometimes you mix, I don't know, maybe I talk too fast, but a lot of times I'll say something about transmissions, and people think I said something about transsexuals, and then they get all confused, and then try to wander off. The point is, it is not true once an ordinary person hears it. Because you've got the two parts of it. That all ordinary larger goals can't succeed. If they succeed, they're extinct. They're suicidal. They're not intended to succeed. They're intended as an ongoing process. If they wanted to stop, well, surely all of you see this by now. How about this? I can't resist. We haven't done it lately, but again, they're all around you, but maybe this will bring a little more in focus. In all the civilized world, which is now about all of the world, collective aspects of humanity, governments, to wit, the collective pimple brain of civilized men, say this: the enforcement of traffic laws are important. Wait, I can beat that. The scarcity. I could drag this out 4 or 5 minutes and build it up, but you can do it. The unprecedented growth physically in urban areas. The scarcity, the shrinking size of this planet vis-a-vis the number of people. The number of automobiles. And governments have to point out now that parking, not just, I was going to do traffic laws, but this is even better. It's faster and to the point. Parking. Parking meters are almost de rigueur everywhere on this planet. And they have people paid by your taxes. Meter maids, meter men, and meter something others. They go around and they ticket you. And they say it's for the purpose of, I've got to keep these areas for trucks to pull up, to keep commerce going. Some of them have to unload here. Sometimes the streets are too narrow. What if suddenly we had a fire? You cannot park here. We got signs that says, down south it says do not park here. Up north, in New York it says things like don't even think about parking. All right. And the more the urban area, they got them now, let's say in Podunk, Mississippi. Downtown they got, if they only had 8 or 10 places to park, they now got parking meters. And plus not only parking meters, but at least probably half the area says no parking. This means you. So if you park and they give you a ticket, let's just say $5. In New York it may be 50 because it's more important, right? To keep the areas clean. Here's the point. I could have done traffic. We could go into other areas, but traffic was kind of in the middle. It would almost make you go, well, yes, we do have to stop people from speeding because it causes death. And that can almost give you a way out. So that's why I jumped down. Follow me. We'll get there in a minute. That's why I jumped down to parking, because it's not going to kill you necessarily. If you park here, you'll die. It's not quite the same as if you drive 90 miles an hour after drinking for 6 straight hours. It's a good chance you're going to die and kill somebody else. So we can't have that. Strict laws. But parking. But still, it's important enough They got signs up. They pay big money. That is, we pay taxes to put up all these signs, to have people paint. People come by. They have nothing but courtrooms in large cities that do nothing but take care of the traffic violations. And judges will even say, you cannot park in those areas that say reserved for an ambulance or reserved for unloading. Do they say it's very important? No, it's. They say it is. But you can stop people from parking in it where it says no parking. Literally. All you got to do, the first time, is they take your car. The second time, they execute you. That's it. Then it just says, you find out it's true, it says, no parking here, violators will be hung. And it's serious. Now, see, this was not a joke. That wasn't the purpose, as you know. But if you think about it, if you're an ordinary person, and God knows what you think about, we don't have time for me to go back and have to play everybody's part, But an ordinary person, the best they could make out of that was that's some kind of joke, or I'm attempting some kind of social satire. Understand that I just didn't drag it out, but they will make a very good case. When I say they, I'm talking about life. I'm talking about the collective intelligence of man. It's not some dumb politician. It's not stupid legislators. But they can make what is a collective, sane, civilized argument that we cannot have uncontrolled parking. The city is getting too large. We have to keep commerce moving. Even if this area is not critical to life or death. Now, some of them it says, only ambulances park here. Or it's got fire hydrants. You cannot park here because what if there's a fire and you park here and a fire truck gets here and it can't get up there? You could kill somebody. They could burn to death here in this apartment house simply because you wanted to save a few steps. You park in front of it. We can't have that. By God, you park in front of a meter. We passed ordinances here. It is, forget $5. It's a $25 fine. And people still do it. And so you say, well, yeah, but they're trying. They're threatening. That's who you're talking about. They're threatening to double it, to make it $50. That ain't going to stop it. Well, it's very simple to stop it, though. City, the world. But some cities say violation of any parking ordinance in this city will result in execution. It's a death penalty. You'll be surprised. Now you're left with what ordinary minds cannot do. You got to be able to look and dance intellectually in 3 or 4 directions at once. See, because what life says is going on, like you didn't lose your place, like the purpose of the immigration department is to stop the entry of illegal aliens and other things. But this guy, the slain veteran border guard, his job specifically was to stop that. No, it wasn't. Well, yeah, it was. Well, you're right, it was. You understand? Well, if you ask him, what if he was still alive? We dug him up and say, your wife is giving interviews pointing out that you lived your life in vain because the number of illegal aliens did not decrease. In fact, increased every year you were there, faithful on the job. He went, yeah, you're right. And if you said, did you really think that was the purpose of your job? What's he going to say? Literally. If you jump in, keep your place. If you jump into this imaginary city or any city to a traffic court judge, the recorder's court or wherever it is in some city, and you say, I notice, surely 30% of the cases you have here are parking violations. And the judge said, yeah, you're right. You say, well, and I notice also that I sit here and I just noticed, I was listening to you and talking to people, and there was not one of the violators today were from out of town. They were all local people. Yeah, that's true. We very seldom get visitors through here. So it's people who know about it, and they know that you'll come around and give them a ticket. Yeah, and they still do it. Well, don't you ever think, well, let's just forget this. The judge, what could he say? If you say, well, you realize this is doing nothing? Do you have any records? Or maybe you say, I went back and checked, by the way, before I came here today, and I found the number of parking violations has increased every year for the last 50 years. And you put up more and more signs, you put in more restricted areas. Yeah, that's true. We have less and less public space. Well, it keeps going up. And the judge said, well, I don't doubt. You're probably right. And if you tried to do like I was going to do that slain border guard, you had to say, well, this whole thing's in vain. What's he going to say? And this is not psychological. It's not that, well, suddenly you tricked them and that you're so sharp you can get ordinary people and make them look like idiots. That's not it. It's literally, it's the laws of electrochemical physics. What's the man going to say if he's sane? Is he going to say, you're right? I kept trying to stop illegal aliens coming in, but that wasn't the point, was it? What if you went that far and you went, by God, you could be an independent thinker. So what is the point? Long about then, his head would do a great imitation of an exploding hand grenade. Because he's left with, well, what is? Because if that wasn't, if I hadn't pretended that that was my job, that I was after a bigger goal for the benefit of all of us, no offense to the people trying to slip in, they just want a better life. I didn't hate them, but by God, we've got to have some kind of law and order. We're short of jobs here on this side of the border, and all kind of good reasons. A larger, decent goal. That's what I was pursuing. Can you get an ordinary person, that is, that flow of energy going through what we call ordinary people, and make them see, well, wait a minute, that wasn't the goal. The goal of all these signs of don't park here, it's not to make people stop parking here. And what's the judge going to say? What's the police going to say? What's the whole city council going to say? By God, you're right. Because if you come that far back to the exploding mind, then you say, well, why did you do it all this time? Then they're all left with, God damn, he's right. Why have we done? And of course, from that, it's one step into, why have I lived? Why have I done anything? And then, of course, this won't happen. But then people, you'd see them begin to shift around, the city council, the judge, and they'd begin to look. They wouldn't know why, but they'd begin to think, there is a hand up my knickers. I've been playing Punch and Judy or Adam and Romulus and Remus. One item down, 17 to go within 2 minutes. Men like to believe in the mysterious since they can't bear the obvious. Now, have we got time to cover that? I just did. From a nonpartisan, non-aggressive, non-judgmental, nonpartisan covers it view, what is all religion? What is all ideas of friendship, romantic love, duty, higher goals? What are they all? There was also in here a definition of myth, which they didn't bring, which ties into this. And the definition in the one news item was myths, stand-ins for tomorrow. Except people think myths are from the past. Yeah, I know. Well, hell, everything's from the past in an ordinary man. If it wasn't for plagiarism, an ordinary man thinks, well, hey, if I couldn't see what other people have already thought, what the hell would I think? Of course, he wouldn't say that. If he did, bring him here some night. All the mysterious. What's the purpose of it? I know at the ordinary collective level it seems to have other purposes. Just like we covered in that news item. Collectively it seems to be some larger goal, such as religion. But all forms of mystery, everything from institutionalized religious beliefs, all the way from that to ideas of flying saucers, the occult, astrology, ghosts coming in your house. Everything mysterious. That is everything, and I'm saying mysterious not just in a real crude pejorative sense, but the unexplainable to men. All the way from the crude, such as those lights I see at night or my brother did, all the way from that sort of thing to what would appear to be perhaps a bit more of an intellectual area of mystery, whatever that be. The news item still stands. Men like to believe in the mysterious because they cannot bear the obvious. Not because of stupidity, but for the same kinds of things that we were just talking about with that first news item, because you're not supposed to. If the purpose of life was to live, that's too obvious. There has to be a mystery. Like, why do we try to do right? Why do we pay taxes? Why do we try and rehabilitate the less fortunate? Why do we try and secure our borders for the good of our own people? Why do we try and spread humanitarian aid to our fellow man? And they spit on us. I lend money to my brother-in-law and he never pays me back. My husband devoted his life to trying to protect the president. And then one day the president was drunk and tripped and fell down the stairs and killed my husband. There always has to be the mystery. Because collectively what men seem to be living for in herds, what men seem to be living for collectively, never comes to fruition. It never succeeds. And so there has to be a mystery. And who thrives on that better than religion? Not, that's just indicative, it's just reflective of the mystery, the desire, the belief in mystery, because you cannot turn around individually, because you would be absolutely regressing if you're ordinary. If you could look at it as this news item did, if you were an individual, if you're an ordinary person, and you could see, well, the point of me living is simply, the point of me being here is to be alive. That's it. I'm not saying that's all of it, but that answers the question about why am I here. Everybody, the more at the ordinary level, the more intelligent they think they are, the more educated people get, they think that question becomes more and more nebulous, more and more transcendental. Ask your stomach. Take a philosopher, take the kind of man, take some mystic in a turban. What is the purpose of life? Go catch him late at night after he's been up preaching or running some kind of philosophical discourse business, and he's starving. That's a hard day of flim-flam, a hard day of discoursing. And he has starved. And there he is with his little cornflakes and some milk, and ask his stomach the purpose. Now, what is the purpose of life? His hormones know. Everybody's does. The purpose of life is to stay the hell alive. That's the purpose of life. But that's too individual. That is too simplistic. That will not do. There has to be the appearance of larger aims. Simply do. Your hormones then step in, which your neurons, cause hormones can't talk anyway. But as soon as neurons here, they're asking again the purpose of life. To make up a silly cartoon scenario right quick, at least the hormones suddenly do learn to speak, and they're hollering out, "Hey, look what we're doing right now." That is, sitting there eating. That would be their answer when they heard the question float through the room there. What is the purpose of life? Their response is, "Hey, watch." The purpose of life is to stay alive. But thanks be to the gods, neurons nowadays will jump in immediately. At least that happened, which it wouldn't, but at least that happened. They jump right in and go, Well, wait till he gets through eating, and then we will sit down and have ourselves a meaty debate and conversation over this. Sure they will. Going nowhere. It's not supposed to go anywhere. Because collectively there has to appear to be greater fish to fry. To mix our metaphors and eating habits in the middle of the story. There has to apparently be greater goals in mind. And properly so. Because the purpose of life cannot be to stay alive. Which you could look at as being, again, if you have to, the kind of beautiful, succinct arrangement, just arrangement of life, because the one part of you who knows, to use the description between hormones and neurons, the one part of you that knows the purpose of being alive can't talk. Boy, isn't that coincidental? And the part that can talk goes, oh boy, I don't know, we're getting closer, but that is a heavy question. And the part that can't talk, it's not a heavy question. They're going, look, that they non-verbally are telling you every time you're hungry, every time you're horny, every time you get in from the cold, every time you come out of the rain when you get too wet. That is the hormones. That is you individually answering the question, what is the purpose of life? Of course, there was not a question to it. It's giving you an answer to no question. The purpose to life is to stay the hell alive. But neurons, that is not a fit answer. That's really no answer at all. And of course, its answer is, in words more or less, that there is no answer. Not yet. There is no answer. And hormones are down there, if this was indeed true, screaming silently You dumb bastards. The purpose of life is obvious. That's just what we're talking about. The mysterious, the unanswerable, the inexplicable, the mysterious. Is there for man to believe in, since he cannot bear, since it would not be profitable, since it is not suitable to dance with the obvious. Good night. Don't change the tape. That's all. We're out of here. And of course, there were at least another 75 news items